Heads up guys, this video is going to contain spoilers for Elden Ring's story. Some of you may be asking, spoilers? For what story? Well, here's the thing guys, Elden Ring has a narrative. Yes, this is a video about the controversy about Elden Ring being nominated for Best Narrative at the Game Awards. There were some people who were weirdly upset about Elden Ring being nominated. Naturally, as the internet does, there were a slew of people talking about their stance on whether or not Elden Ring even had a narrative. Now then, I might be several months late to this discussion because making this video took a while, but I am here to tell you that Elden Ring does in fact have a narrative. In fact, it's probably the most narratively driven game in the Soulsborne series, not including Sekiro. Let me try to explain. Let's get the obvious discussion out of the way first before delving into the narrative structure. Yes, From Software titles tell their stories in unique, minimalist ways. Most of the exposition and lore is found in character interactions, item descriptions, and environmental details. Don't get me wrong, there are cinematic cutscenes in Elden Ring, but these cutscenes are reserved for pivotal story moments and boss phase transitions. The rest of the narrative is told through NPC dialogue and environmental details. Believe it or not, this form of storytelling can be quite effective. Let me spotlight this with one of my favorite examples in the game, the Stargazer's Ruins. When you reach the Stargazer's Ruins, there will be a spirit jellyfish talking about her sister. This spirit jellyfish will say things such as, "Sister, where did you go? You promised me when we turned 14 we'd go see the stars." This might not make much sense until you take a walk down the backside of the ruins to this cliff. Behind a mob of annoying bats, there is a pair of graves with the words on them saying, "Here lie Ariella and Arielette, who never saw the stars." Now then, early on in the game, Rodrika will give you a spirit summon which is a jellyfish named Ariella. Upon returning to the jellyfish in the ruins, you can summon the spirit jellyfish Ariella. Upon doing this, the jellyfish that was in the ruins will erupt into excitement at the return of her sister, and with contagious exuberance will say, "No time to waste, let's see the stars." I don't know about you, but this microscopic interaction hit me hard, and I almost cried. It's cool to see that spirit summons aren't just a way of making the game easier, and the item that is rewarded expands the lore of the Glintstone sorcerers. It's also just sad thinking about this poor girl who has been waiting for what must have been thousands of years, lamenting about the loss of her sister, only for some random tarnish to pull out a spirit summon that was rewarded at the start of the game, who miraculously turned out to be her sister. It's just a really heartwarming interaction. This isn't the only character interaction like this, since there are numerous side quests that are told with this subtle storytelling method to great effect. It's also important to address how Elden Ring uses its environments to tell stories as well. Caelid might first appear as a desolate wasteland with little depth, until you learn about the conflict between Melina and Radahn that rendered the Caelid Wilds a desolate landscape suffering from scarlet rot. But there are smaller, more minute details, such as the boss arena where you fight the Elden Beast. Hundreds of golden trees might seem one-dimensional at first, but when you look at the ruined trees in the consecrated snowfields, it starts to form a picture of a land brimming with Erd trees before the fire giants burnt them all down with their flame of ruin. Okay, there isn't much other lore that corroborates the burnt tree hypothesis, but it's a fun idea to think about. It's these small details that not only enrich the lore, but also the characters living in this world and their motivations behind their actions. The lore, character interactions, and environmental details paint a picture of an enthralling story. Now that I have addressed the conversation everyone on the internet has already made, let's talk about the narrative itself. When analyzing a story, there are certain questions that need to be asked. Some of them are, who is the main character, what does the character want, and what does the character need? So the question becomes apparent, who is the main character? The simplest answer would be the player character. The player can modify their character in all sorts of ways, making them a stone-cold killer who wants to see the world burn, a youthful optimist looking for a way to make a name for herself, or even a hero who doomed the world and is looking for a way to atone for his mistakes. You could even make a Na'vi from Pandora starting off as a barbarian. This fits surprisingly well. However, the answer to who the main character is more complicated than you would initially think. One way to identify the main character is by identifying the person that the audience attaches to the most and follows throughout the story. Okay, that was a little too obvious. But another trait of the main character is that their actions and choices drive the story forward. With this in mind, there is a strong case to be made that Melina, the maiden who sets us off to the Erdtree capital, would be the main character. While this is a fun thought experiment, Melina is in fact not the protagonist of the story. I'll explain more later, but before that, I need to explain narrative structure. There are multiple ways to organize the narrative structure of a story, but the most popular method is Freytag's pyramid. You've likely seen this chart at some point in your life. The pyramid starts off with exposition. Exposition is the point where the world and characters are introduced. It's like setting the stage for the audience before the action happens. You could even say that this point of the video you're watching is the exposition part of the video. Then comes the inciting incident, the point of attack where the characters are set off on their journey. After the inciting incident, conflicts and tension build up during the rising action. The dramatic tension continues building until the climax of the story, the point where the narrative tension reaches the breaking point. After the climax, we enter the falling action, where all the pieces are moving into place for the big finale. Finally, we reach the resolution of the story, or the denouement, where all loose ends are tied up and the story ends. This form of narrative structure isn't very strict, so it can be applied to many stories. Freytag's pyramid isn't the only way to lay out stories, since there is another popular method to track narrative. It's called the hero's journey. This method of analyzing narrative was popularized by Joseph Campbell. Campbell was studying global mythologies when he noticed some reoccurring patterns in stories being told. He compiled these reoccurring patterns into what he called the hero's journey. This really caught on with some people, and even inspired George Lucas while creating Star Wars. Luke Skywalker's journey in the original trilogy was based off the hero's journey. And would you look at that? The hero's journey makes this fancy-dancy ring, perfect for analyzing Elden Ring story. Now then, the original hero's journey by Joseph Campbell had 17 categories to really encapsulate all stories. But the thing about the hero's journey is that it's somewhat malleable, and it can be shifted and bent to adjust to individual stories. For the sake of time and sanity, I'm going to simplify things down a bit and include all major steps of the hero's journey. While I might be addressing the most applicable aspects of the hero's journey, there are other major points of the hero's journey that can be associated with elements of Elden Ring. The meeting of the goddess can be very easily associated with Ranni's questline, and the entire idea of the apotheosis, growing and rising to the challenge, echoes the very principles of From Software design. I've wasted enough time. It's time to give you what you came here for, and that's an explanation of the narrative, so let's go. Elden Ring starts off with the backstory of the Lands Between. It explains how the Elden Ring, a legendary artifact that affects the nature of the world, has been shattered, and the god of this world, Queen Marika, is missing. Pieces of the shattered Elden Ring fell into the hands of Queen Marika's offspring, the demigods, and a war between the demigods broke out and ravaged the world. With no demigod capable of rising to become Elden Lord and fix the Lands Between, the Guidance of Grace reaches out to the Tarnished in a last-ditch effort to save the state of the world. This entire opening slideshow is the exposition, the first step in Freytag's pyramid structure. The Tarnished wakes up in the Chapel of Anticipation, ready to start the journey. Oh wait, who's this corpse here? Well, this was supposed to be our maiden, and she was supposed to guide us to becoming Elden Lord. But now she's dead and can't do that. She did leave a message. Though the path be broken and uncertain, claim your place as Elden Lord. This would have been the first step in the hero's journey, or the call to adventure, but that is not the case. After dying to the Grafted Scion or falling off the cliff, the waves take the Tarnished's body to the Cave of Knowledge, a proper tutorial area getting players familiar with the game. Elden Ring then makes the bold move of jumping straight to the crossing of the threshold. The crossing of the threshold is the point where the main character enters into the unknown world and into the adventure. The crossing of the threshold is especially important to this game, since Elden Ring is an open world game brimming with adventure. There's just one problem. Our maiden, who was supposed to be the call to adventure, was dead, so the main character only has a few clues as to where to go. Fortunately for the Tarnished, after a little bit of exploring, the player encounters Melina. At night, while sitting alone at a site of grace, Melina will appear out of nowhere and offer an accord. Melina makes the astute observation that we are maidenless. Thanks for rubbing it in, Melina. But not all hope is lost, since Melina can fill the role of maiden by giving guidance and converting the runes we find into levels. With this, the player can make up for the loss of their maiden and become Elden Lord. For this service, Melina only asks one small favor. She wants us to take her to the foot of the Erd Tree. Melina's memories are fractured, and by reaching the Erd Tree capital of Leyndell, she hopes to find out what her purpose was in life. This moment here is the inciting incident, the call to adventure, the point of attack, or whatever else you want to name it. In this moment, the adventure really gets kicked off with Melina giving an objective to reach the Erd Tree. And if you chat with her at other sites of grace, she will tell you interesting information about lore and even directs you to hunt down and slay Godric, who resides inside Stormveil Castle. Melina is a massive help on this journey, but her helpfulness doesn't stop there. Melina also fulfills the role of supernatural aid in the hero's journey. Supernatural aid counts as anything that assists the hero on their journey, and the first two gifts that Melina gives us are the ability to level up and a magic ring that can call forth a spectral steed named Torrent. If using a ring to summon forth a steed materializing out of the Aether doesn't count as supernatural aid, then I don't know what will. But wait, there's more. After approaching Stormveil, players will have to face Morgot the Fell Omen. Upon killing Morgot, Melina will offer even more supernatural aid by transporting the Tarnished to the Round Table Hold. Actually, Melina will take you to the Round Table if you rest at a site of grace outside a certain parameter. Regardless, Melina thinks we have the stuff to become Elden Lord. The Round Table was made for Tarnished warriors who aspire to rise to the rank of Elden Lord, so it's a pretty helpful place. This supernatural man cave resides in another realm, separate from the rest of the world. Here, you can get your weapons upgraded, spirit summons upgraded, transforming remembrances into sweet tools, and buying items off the Twin Maiden husks. Here, Gideon Ofnir the Snarky informs the Tarnished that we need to acquire a Great Rune. Great Runes are large portions of the Elden Ring that fell into the hands of the demigods, members of the lineage descended from Queen Marika herself. There are 4 potential Great Runes that can be collected in the early game. One from Godric, one from Manala, one from Starscourge Radahn, and one from Rykard Lord of Blasphemy. I know it might be a little intimidating to fight such mythical foes, but fortunately, the game isn't stingy about which rune you collect first. In total, the player needs to collect 2 Great Runes, and it doesn't matter what order you complete them in. On that note, Godric the Grafted is the most squishy of the demigods, so it's recommended you kill him first. The collection of the Great Runes is the start of what we call the rising action in Freytag's Pyramid, or the road of trials in the hero's journey. The Tarnished are taking steps to achieve their goal, and they have to face trials along the way. After the player collects 2 of the Great Runes, the 2 fingers will lift the seal that blocks players from entering Leyndell. Now you can reach the end of your journey with Melina. Upon entering Leyndell, Melina will visit you one more time, this time to say goodbye. The player has managed to bring her to the Golden City, and Melina has questions that she hopes will be answered here. She says goodbye and leaves Torrent and the power to level up with the player. Then she takes off. There are now 2 bosses that need to be defeated. The first is a golden memory of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. As you approach the Erd Tree, there is only one more foe that stands in your way. It's Morgot, but as it turns out, that wasn't his real name. This is Morgot, the Omen King, who stands guard and prevents anyone from entering the Erd Tree. Morgot is a tough fight, but you don't have to take him on alone, since Melina can be summoned as a cooperator to help fight Morgot. After a grueling fight, Morgot is finally slain. However, it is in fact he who has the last laugh. A dying Morgot breaks the news that even if we wanted to, no one could enter the Erd Tree, meaning no one could possibly claim the title of Elden Lord. Morgot then laments that we are all forsaken, and then he dies. Upon inspection, his words ring true. There are jagged thorns blocking off the entrance to the Erd Tree. Strangely enough, these thorns are accompanied with golden lines that are typically associated with Radagon, the Elden Lord that followed after Godfrey. We can't enter the Erd Tree. All that fighting was for nothing. This here is what some call the first culmination, the first major breakthrough towards the main character's goals. However, these hopes were stamped out and thrown us into a dark spot. This is reminiscent of the belly of the whale on the hero's journey, only it is applicable to other characters as well. All these characters kept telling us that we would become Elden Lord. However, with this revelation that no one can enter the Erd Tree, everyone is stumped and they don't know what to do. The lamentation of the characters marks the point of despair on the hero's journey, also known as the belly of the whale. Just like at the start of our journey, Melina comes to the Tarnished with a solution to our problem. She seems to have found out what her destiny was, and proposes that the player character goes on another journey with her, to the mountaintops of the giants to burn the Erd Tree. These thorns the Erd Tree has grown will fend everyone off, but it might be possible that by burning the Erd Tree, the thorns barring the way will be burned away, and the path forward will be cleared. This begins a miniature elixir journey. Elixir journey refers to the characters setting off to find a solution to a problem. In this case, the elixir is the Flame of Ruin and Destined Death. Now then, remember how at the beginning of the video I was talking about who the main character was? Well, this is where the player's choices become most apparent. Melina gives the Tarnished the Rolled Medallion, an item that will allow the player to reach the Forbidden Lands. Here in the Forbidden Lands, a flame that was tended to by the fire giants could set the Erd Tree on fire. On a normal playthrough of the game, players would fight and kill the fire giant boss, and then Melina would use her own flesh as kindling for the Flame of Ruin and set the Erd Tree on fire. Oh, and Melina dies if you do this. While it is depressing to see Melina go, there are in fact two ways that you can set the Erd Tree on fire. On the snowy path to the mountains, a character named Yura can be encountered. Yura can be seen in other parts of the game, but this is only Yura's flesh. The real person that we are talking to here is an individual named Shabriri. Shabriri is the one who breaks it to you that if we continue down this path, Melina will die. But there is a way to prevent this from happening. This solution lies underneath Leyndell in the sewers. If the player descends far enough down here, they will encounter a fight with Mog the Omen. But even beyond Mog, there lies a vertical chamber filled to bursting with the desiccated corpses of merchants who were buried alive. At the bottom of this chamber lie the Three Fingers, and the key to becoming Lord of Frenzied Flame. This is pretty much the path to the bad ending of the game. When you make it down here, Melina begs the player not to seek an audience with the Three Fingers. It's actually kind of heartbreaking listening to Melina beg the player to turn back. If the player refuses to listen to Melina, they will take off all their armor and open the door to the Three Fingers. Then the Three Fingers will grab onto the Tarnished and they will inherit the Frenzied Flame. Melina will become pissed when the player does this, and she tells us that if we become Elden Lord, she will kill us. This is important to the discussion on who the main character of Elden Ring is. Remember, one of the traits of the main character is that their actions will often have the biggest impact on events in the narrative. Many people believe that Melina is the main character because her reaching out to the Tarnished was her choice that affects the narrative of the story, and sacrificing herself to burn the Erd Tree was her decision as well. However, Melina only has a limited effect on the narrative of the game, and it is in fact the player's choices that affect how the game plays out. By becoming Lord of Frenzied Flame, an alternative cutscene will play where the Tarnished will listen to the Flame of Ruin and set the Erd Tree on fire themselves. By having this option here, and the ability to choose which of the game's endings to achieve, it shows that the player character has the most control over how events in the story play out, and therefore makes us the main character. But like I said, it's the player's choice to embrace the Three Fingers. In fact, sacrificing her body to burn the Erd Tree is what Melina wants. The Erd Tree is set aflame and the Tarnished is transported to the ancient ruins of the crumbling Farum Azula. Okay, it's time for a little lore break. Except this lore is important to the story, so it's not really a break. You see, the Elden Ring has considerable influence over the nature of the world, including the concept of death. When Queen Marika became the god of the world, the Golden Order was formed. This order then removed a piece of the Elden Ring, the Rune of Death, and it was sealed within Malekith the Black Blade. By doing this, the Golden Order essentially deprived certain beings the ability to die. Such things that we know aren't able to truly die are the demigods, hence why it was such a big deal that on the Night of Black Knives, the firstborn of the demigods, Godwyn the Golden, was killed. The Erdtree is one of these things that is denied the ability to die, so it's not really on fire. It's in this weird in-between state of being on fire, but nothing is burned or perishing. So the thorns blocking the entrance to the Erdtree haven't really been burned away. In order for the Erdtree to truly burn, Destined Death, or better known as the Rune of Death, needs to be set free so the Erdtree can truly burn and open the path to becoming Elden Lord. This is why Melina won't stop talking about Destined Death. It's because nothing can perish so long as Destined Death is sealed away. What the Tarnished now needs to do is release Destined Death from its container, although that's going to be easier said than done. After a piece of the Rune of Death was stolen to kill Godwyn, Malekith has gone to incredible lengths to prevent Destined Death from leaving his supervision. Malekith sealed the Rune of Death within himself, so in order to release it, Doggo has to die. So that's exactly what we do. The player needs to navigate through the crumbling Farum Azula, kill the Godskin duo since they likely want Destined Death for themselves, and continue to the main boss of the area. Here we fight Malekith the Black Blade, and he sure does put up a fight. Upon defeating Malekith, the Rune of Death is released. We have finally reached the climax of the narrative. The climax of the story is the moment when the dramatic tension reaches its highest point yet, and it is at this moment that the gold-tinged excrement hits the ceiling, the fan, the dog, and your neighbor who was in another house. The Erdtree is on fire, really on fire this time. Leyndell has been completely covered in ash, the Round Table Hold is also on fire, a ton of side quests that haven't been completed yet just end, and a bunch of NPCs perish or disappear. Hewig doesn't even recognize Rodrika anymore. Guys, it's a mess. However, there is a silver lining to this madness. After releasing Destined Death, the player blacks out and wakes up in the Ashen Capital. This magic teleportation is reminiscent of the magic flight seen in the hero's journey. It's a moment when the hero acquires the elixir or solution to their problem and makes a swift and sometimes magical return to the conclusion of the story. From here, the end of the game is quite literally in sight now that the thorns blocking the way forward have been cleared. We have now transitioned into the falling action of Freytag's Pyramid. Being in the falling action phase of a story doesn't mean there aren't any challenges on the horizon. There were many people seeking to become Elden Lord themselves, and now we need to prove that it is the player character who deserves the title of Elden Lord. The first of these competitors is Sir Gideon Ofnir the Monologuing, whose difficulty never seems to stay consistent. Gideon isn't the only challenge, since there is one more boss standing in our way to the final boss. Godfrey the First Elden Lord, the real one this time, has returned from exile to reclaim the title of Elden Lord. We first find him holding the corpse of his son Morgot, the son we killed. Well, that's awkward. Godfrey turns to acknowledge us, and we begin to fight. Do you remember that kind of intimidating ginger-headed giant we killed to access the Flame of Ruin? Well, Godfrey here led an army in a war against the fire giants, and he won! If we want to claim the title of Elden Lord, we need to prove that we deserve it over legends like this. After this awesome battle, who should have been the final boss of the game, Godfrey gives us some words of encouragement in his defeat. Brave Tarnished, thy strength befits a crown. And now, there is only one fight left, the final boss. Upon entering the Erdtree, we see that Queen Marika is also the red-haired Radagon. Trust me, there is foreshadowing to this twist, but the hint is tied to this statue that I forgot to get footage of before it got buried beneath the ash. Sorry about that. After beating Radagon, we then need to fight the Elden Beast. After it dies, the final battle is now concluded, and we can move on to the end. On Freytag's Pyramid, this would be the resolution, or denouement. And we have completed the journey we have set off on, meaning that we have also completed the hero's journey. Depending on the actions the player takes, you can unlock unique endings. There are a total of 6 endings to be achieved in Elden Ring, although 4 of them can be boiled down into one ending, leaving 3 unique endings to the game. The first ending, and the one that requires the least amount of extra work, is the Elden Lord ending. In this ending, the player picks up the head of Queen Marika, places it on her petrified husk, and the player character can then be seen sitting on a throne. We have now completed the task of becoming Elden Lord. Another ending that is available is the Age of the Stars ending. In order to achieve this, the player has to complete Ranni's questline, which culminates in the Tarnished placing a ring on Ranni's finger and receiving the Dark Moon Greatsword. If a girl gave me this weapon as an engagement gift, I would know it was true love. You can then activate this ending by using the summon sign next to Marika instead of mending the Elden Ring. Ranni will then appear and will then bring forth the Age of the Moon and Stars. Lastly, and certainly not least, is the Frenzied Flame ending. Remember how there was that whole business of Melina, and instead of sacrificing Melina, you can become Lord of Frenzied Flame and set the Erd Tree on fire yourself? Well, if you follow through with that and beat the game, the third unique ending can be activated. Instead of mending the Elden Ring, the Tarnished player's head will then transform into a Frenzied Flame crown. The Lord of Frenzied Flame brings forth an all-consuming flame that consumes the world. But it's not over yet. If players embrace the Frenzied Flame before setting the Erd Tree ablaze, then a special cutscene will play with Melina. She will walk across a now ashen boss arena to a pile of ash where the ring that summons Torrent can be found whistling for help. As Torrent's ring disintegrates into ash, Melina will then open her closed eye and vow to kill the player. This is a super fun ending, and I want to know which of the endings is your favorite in the comments down below. And there you have it, the full narrative of Elden Ring. If we look at the progression of the events in Elden Ring, we can see that they match up remarkably well with the hero's journey and Freytag's pyramid. Starting off in Limgrave, the call to adventure begins with Melina reaching out to the player. After this, the Road of Trials begins, where we collect great runes, adventure to dangerous lands, fight giants, burn the Erd Tree, which leads to the climactic release of Destined Death. This then is followed by a magic flight to the Falling Action, which leads to the final battle and conclusion of the story. It may not be the most complicated narrative in all of gaming, but it's still there, and it's a pretty good narrative. It's just that the narrative isn't on dramatic display in the game, and so people missed it. Elden Ring doesn't have any 500-page cinematic scripts or 11 hours of cutscenes, and it doesn't need to. The story is told in a unique way. You just have to look for it. So if you ask me, yes, Elden Ring did deserve to be nominated for Best Narrative. Sure, it didn't win against God of War Ragnarok, but I think its nomination was in fact justified. The only thing I'm bugged by is how Xenoblade Chronicles 3 wasn't nominated for Best Narrative, because that game did not get enough recognition at the 2022 Game Awards. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think of all this? Do you still think that Melina is the main character of Elden Ring? Do you think the belly of the whale was at a different part of the adventure? Which of Elden Ring's endings is your favorite? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, thanks for watching this video until the end. In any case, have a nice day, and bye. I'm gonna work on some other video. I'll see you guys then. Bye.